historically, a lot of these breakaway Methodist groups, like the Methodist Protestants, I keep going back to that because this church I'm serving now started off as a Methodist Protestant church. A lot of these breakaway Wesleyan denominations historically have done and are doing well. I mean, broadly speaking, groups like the Wesleyans and Nazarenes are still around. Salvation Army, obviously, you got one, in your town, I'm sure. They're still around. God's still bearing fruit. The AME Zion are still around. At the same time, I think Taleb uses, the language of sort of productive stress, right? That institutions need those shocks to their system to sort of wake them up in a way. And so it could be that. It could be in a continuing UMC that having this wake up call, having to have these conversations about what it means to be a Methodist is productive. It could be as simple as having, a large contingent of more conservative folks leave, just allows us to focus on other stuff down the road. And not to say that that's the conservatives' fault, but like at a certain point, someone's got to go so that we can be productive and have some sort of common vision for the church. Because right now it's kind of impossible. I think that split happening creates a possibility for a common vision for the UMC moving forward that doesn't exist now. Whether we'll take up that challenge, whether our leaders pursue that, I don't know. I think it's possible. You could play devil's advocate and say that the ELCA, the PCUSA, et cetera, have not done great after their conservative splits. But that's not, we're a different church than those in a lot of ways. But that doesn't mean that it couldn't be so with us. But I think on the whole, this concept that complex systems need stress and challenge to grow, I think is also true for us. And I think the danger for us is so much of the emphasis, like in a local church, like any institution, any organization, when the emphasis becomes on survival, that's when you really start struggling, right? If you're not trying to fulfill your mission, you're just trying to survive. And I think that'll be the challenge moving forward for the continuing UMC as resources and people shrink. But if we see it as an opportunity, like, okay, we've been fighting over this for 50 years. Now let's try to move forward in mission and ministry, figure out who we are. Let's go after it. It could happen. It'd be great if it did, but who knows?
Why do you think that hasn't, or at least it appears to not have happened in other bodies where there have been splits?
Oh, that's a good question. I mean, I don't want to be overly negative about bodies of which I'm not a part, but I mean, you and I have had conversations about sort of the Mainline. Mm-hmm. I think on a broad level, Mainline Christianity seems to be heavily invested at being a chaplain to the culture. And I think if all you're offering people is the water they're swimming in, I don't know that you have much to make people give of their time and resources and energy. I don't know if all you're offering, the old joke is the Anglican Church was the Tory party at prayer, right? The Mainline is largely, in a lot of instances, the DNC at prayer. Nothing wrong with being a Democrat and a Christian. Please don't at me. I'm not saying that. Right? What I'm saying is when your entire program is just clearly aligned with a certain ideology, contemporary ideology, you're not offering anyone something to give themselves to. So I would think that any Mainline renewal would have to be a renewal both of doctrine and vision. Mm-hmm. I think if you get fuzzy on who God is, it becomes very difficult to have a compelling reason to come to church. That makes
How
sense?
would you, I mean, I guess you've kind of done it a little bit, but unpack a little bit more of what it means to be a chaplain to the culture.
The example of Methodist, for instance, I think there was a book by this title or something close to it, from the side street to the main street, that
Mhm.
in the course of the 19th century and the 20th century in particular, Methodism went from being a radical frontier faith, with high buy-in, high engagement, a high bar for staying in, both for clergy and for laity. The historians I've read, and I think they're correct, I have reason to believe they're correct, argue that as Methodism gained in numbers and gained cultural prestige, that a lot of what made Methodists successful went away. A lot of the particularities of the tradition, a lot of the church discipline in terms of class meetings, band meetings, the emphasis on holiness, a lot of that particularity went away over time. Scott Kisker has a book called Mainline Methodist that gets at this a lot. So I think that's a lot of it. So when the goal becomes seeking respect from the culture, right? If your goal is to be the church that your local politicians and the bankers and the whatever college professors can go to, that's all good and well. But if in doing that you're losing some vitality, there's a cost over time. And I think largely the mainline has become this, respectable but toothless institutions. That's what I mean by that. Not much to say, and you definitely in Methodism, if you look at statements that come out of our various organizations, we have organizations that do great things, but the statements themselves are often not anything you could not get from another mainline body on the same thing. It's very theology and doctrine light. It's very ideologically heavy.